Hi, welcome to part 2 in our exploration of Asian art. In this segment, we're going to be looking at the geographical location of India. And India is the birthplace of Hinduism, which we'll be looking at some art and architecture related to this belief. So Hinduism is bound to the hierarchical structure of a caste system, a categorization of members of society into very defined social classes. As individuals positioned in the caste system, it is thought to be a reflection of accumulated merit in past lives, or what is known as karma. Observance of the Dharma, or behavior consistent with one's caste and status, is discussed in many early philosophical texts. Not every religious practice can be undertaken by all members of society. Similarly, different activities are considered appropriate for different stages of life, with study and raising families necessary for early stages, and reflection and reunification of goals of later years. A religious life need not be spiritual to the exclusion of worldly pleasures or rewards, such as the pursuit of material success and legitimate pleasure, depending on one's position in life. Hindus believe in the importance of the observation of appropriate behavior, including numerous rituals, and the ultimate goal of moksha, the release or liberation from the endless cycle of birth. And so on this slide, we're looking at some sort of beliefs of Hinduism common to virtually all Hindus, all certain beliefs, including but not limited to the following: a belief in many gods, so it's a polytheistic religion, which are seen as manifestations of a single unity. These deities are linked to universal and natural processes, a preference for one deity while not excluding or disbelieving others. So you might have a favorite deity, a belief in the universal law of cause and effect, karma, and reincarnation, a belief in the possibility of liberation and release, or moksha, by which the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, samsara, can be resolved. So this is our first Hindu object that we're going to be looking at. The art of medieval India, like the art of medieval Europe, which we haven't discussed yet but will, was primarily in the service of religion. The devotee's spiritual experience was enhanced by meditation inspired by works of art and architecture. Just as the luminous upper chapel of the Santi Chapel dazzled and overwhelmed worshippers in France, the looming bronze statues of Shiva and Parvati, for example, the inner halls of the Meenakshi temple in Madura in South India, would have awed a Hindu devotee. It is important to keep in mind that the bronze Shiva, as Lord of the Dance, Nataraja, Nata meaning dance or performance, and Raja meaning king or lord, is a sacred object that has been taken out of its original context. In fact, we don't even know where this particular sculpture was originally venerated. In the immediate space of Florence and Herbert Irving South Asian Galleries and the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Shiva Nataraja is surrounded by other metal statues of Hindu gods, including the Lord Vishnu, Parvati, and Hanuman. It is easy to become absorbed in the dark quiet of these galleries, which is a remarkable collection of divine figures. And we've talked about this idea before, in particular with Pacific and African and Indigenous American masks, that these often when we look at these objects out of context, in particular in a museum, there's an important component being left out. In this case, this being a ritual object with Hinduism. So as we look at this collection of divine figures, it is important to remember that this particular statue is intended to be movable, which explains its moderate size, so it's not very large, and sizable circular base, ideal for lifting and hoisting onto one's shoulders. So, from the 11th century and onwards, Hindu devotees carried these statues in processional parades as priests followed chanting prayers and bestowing the blessings on people gathering for this purpose. Sometimes the statue would be adorned in like red and green clothing and gold jewelry to denote the glorious human form of the god. In these processions, the Shiva Nataraja may have had its legs wrapped with white and red cloth, adorned with flowers and surrounded by candles. In a religious Hindu context, the statue is the literal embodiment of the divine. When the worshiper comes before the statue and begins to pray, faith activates the divine energy inherent in the statue. At that moment, Shiva is present. So it's not the actual object, it's the interaction of the worshiper or the devotee with that ritual object. So here you can see one of these sort of Hindu statues being adorned and sort of participating in a processional. So Shiva constitutes a part of a powerful triad of divine energy within the cosmos of Hindu religion. This is Brahma, the benevolent creator of the universe. There is Vishnu, the sagacious preserver, and then there is Shiva, the destroyer. Destroyer in this sense is not an entirely negative force, but one that is expansive in its impact. In Hindu religious philosophy, all things must come to a natural end so that they can begin again. And Shiva is the agent that brings about this end so that the new cycle can begin. The Metropolitan Museum's Shiva Nataraja, which you're looking at now, was made sometime in the 11th century during the Kaloa dynasty from the 19th to the 13th century CE in South India in what is now the state of Tamil Nadu, one of the longest lasting empires of South India. The Kaloa dynasty heralded a golden age of exploration, trade, and artistic development. A great era innovation within the arts of the Kaloa period was in the field of metalwork, particularly in bronze sculpture. The expanse of the Kaloa Empire stretched southeast toward Sri Lanka and gave the kingdom access to vast copper reserves that enabled the proliferation of bronze work by skilled artisans. During this period, a new kind of sculpture is made, one that combines the expressive qualities of stone temple carving with the rich iconography possible in bronze casting. The image of Shiva is taken from the ancient Indian manual of visual depictions, the Shilpa Shastras, the science, which translates to the science of rules of sculpture, which contained a precise set of measurements and shapes for the limbs and proportions of the divine figure. Arms were to be long like stalks, similar to bamboo, faces round like the moon, and eyes shaped like almonds of the leaves of a lotus. The Shastras was a primer on the ideals of beauty and physical perfection within ancient Hindu ideology. So this was their sort of ideal beauty. Here Shiva embodies those perfect physical qualities as he is frozen in the moment of his dance within the cosmic circle of fire. That is the simultaneous and continuous creation and destruction of the universe. The ring of fire that surrounds the figure is the encapsulated cosmos of mass, time, and space, whose endless cycle of annihilation and regeneration moves in tune to the beat of Shiva's drum and the rhythm of his steps. In his upper right hand, he holds the Damaru, the drum, whose beats syncopate the act of creation and the passage of time. His lower right hand, with his palm raised and facing the viewer, is lifted in the gesture of Abhaya, or the Abhaya Mudra, A mudra is usually some sort of hand gesture in Hinduism or Buddhism, which says to supplicate. Quote, "Be not afraid, for those who follow the path of righteousness will have my blessing." Shiva's lower left hand stretches diagonally across his chest with his palm facing down towards his raised left foot, which signifies spiritual grace and fulfillment through meditation and mastery over one's baser appetites. In his upper left hand, he holds the Agni, the flame of destruction, um, that annihilates all the sound of the Damaru that the Damaru has drummed into existence. So here you see a detail of Shiva's upper left hand holding the Agni, the flame of destruction. We'll look at some more details. Here we see Shiva's right foot, and he stands upon the huddled dwarf, and this is the demon Apsara, the embodiment of ignorance. And then Shiva's hair, the long hair of the yogi, streams out across the space within the halo of the fire that constitutes the universe. Throughout this entire process of chaos and renewal, the face of the god remains tranquil, transfixed in what the historians of South Asian art call the mask of God's eternal essence. And this is something that we'll see, this look of nobility or being stoic in a lot of representations of gods, deities, and sometimes rulers. The supple and expressive quality of the dancing Shiva is one of the touchstones of South Asian, and indeed world sculpture. When the French sculptor Augustus Rodin saw some photographs of the 11th century bronze Shiva Nataraja in the Madras Museum around 1915, he wrote that it seemed to him the perfect expression of rhythmic movement in the world. In an essay he wrote that was published in 1921, he wrote that the Shiva Nataraja has what many people cannot see, the unknown depths, the core of life. There is a grace and elegance, but beyond grace there is perfection. Quote, the English philosopher Aldous Huxley said in an interview in 1961 that the Hindu image of God as a dancer is unlike anything he has seen in Western art. Quote, we do not have anything that approaches the symbolism of this work of art, which is both cosmic and psychological. All right, so we're going to be looking at another representation of a Hindu deity. This is an image of the goddess Durga. She is shown in a triumphant pose as the slayer of the buffalo demon, Mahisha. Durga is a manifestation of the goddess who can also appear as a consort, Parvati, I can't say her name, Parvati, I think that's how you say, or as a destructive figure, Kali. Durga is a powerful manifestation of Parvati, and as such appears on her own rather than as a consort of Shiva. Durga appeared when the gods were unable to subdue a demon who was threatening the entire world. Individually, the gods were unable to defeat the demon. They summoned Durga and gave her all their weapons. The battle went on, prolonged by the fact that Mahisha continually changed shape. Finally, Durga was able to cut off his head as the demon emerged from a buffalo. In this scene, the struggle and violence of the combat between goddess and demon is only subtly suggested. Durga stands victoriously over the head of the buffalo, alluding to the famous story, but focusing most of the viewer's attention on the powerful goddess herself. Hindu imagery, many divine figures are often portrayed with their vehicles. Animals associated with them, such as the eagle, Garuda, earlier seen portrayed with the god Vishnu. In the visual arts, gods' vehicles will often be seen to physically support and transport them. In this sculpture, as well as in other South Indian renditions of the subject, the artist has creatively subverted the idea of vehicle to create a deft suggestion of a mythic story using basic iconographic um, device. How do we recognize Durga? The goddess Durga is usually depicted with many arms and sometimes rides on a lion or tiger. Her conventional vehicle. Her weapons include a sword, shield, bow, an arrow, club, and trident. Durga is a powerful figure and a woman, and she is usually depicted standing above the buffalo demon or riding on a lion with raised weapons. Another sometimes having fangs and wearing a garland of several heads. The wrathful goddess Kali is similar in nature um, to Baha, Bhairava, the fierce form of Shiva. The artisans who created the statue of Durga have combined an image of a victory with an image of beauty. The figure is richly adorned with jewelry, a tall crown, and has a slender waist and graceful pose. In this sense, she reflects the ability of most goddess figures to act courageously in the world and at the same time be subjects of devotion and beauty. Um, so, how was the sculpture used? The sculpture might have been placed in a niche of a wall of Sorry about that. So it might have been placed in a niche of a wall on a southern Indian temple during the Kaloa dynasty around 1000 CE. The graceful, slender, elongated form of the figure is typical of this period. Her image communicates the idea of triumph over adversity and the ability to conquer adversaries unvanquishable by the gods. And we're going to be looking at some videos, and so you'll see some other representations of Durga. I think she looks really cool when she has all her arms. So I'm going to stop here, and we will we'll continue looking at India geographically, but we'll kind of move into the religion of Buddhism. So stay tuned.